1 Corinthians 9:19 through 23.
Is the microphone not on?
What's that?
Your microphone on?
No, it's on.
Yeah, it's on.
It's on.
You not hearing me?
It could be up a little bit, but it's not bad.
Let's get more directly in front of
There you
Oh,
go.
yeah, that's good.
Hey, Jeff. All right. Fortunately, Jeff, you were here last week when Brad was preaching.
You'll be fine.
Oh, thanks, Jeff.
The Lord is with you.
Thank you. All right. Those of you who found your spot in 1 Corinthians 9:19 through 23. For though I am free from all, I have made myself a servant to all, that I might win more of them. To the Jews I became as a Jew, in order to win Jews. To those under the law I became as one under the law, though not being myself under the law, that I might win those under the law. To those outside the law I became as one outside the law, not being outside the law of God, but under the law of Christ, that I might win souls, win those outside the law. To the weak I became weak, that I might win the weak. I become all things to all people, that by all means I might save some. I do it all for the sake of the gospel, that I may share with them in its blessings. So to the Jews I became a Jew in order to win Jews. To become a Jew was very easy for Paul because he was one. But even though he's already a Jew, this ethnicity no longer defined him. In Philippians 3:3-7, we are the circumcision who worship by the Spirit of God in the glory in Christ Jesus and put no confidence in the flesh. Though I myself, this is Paul, have reason for confidence in the flesh also. If anyone else thinks he has reason for confidence in the flesh, I have more. Circumcised on the 8th day of the people of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of Hebrews, as to the law a Pharisee, as to zeal a persecutor of the church, as to righteousness under the law blameless. But whatever gain I had, I counted as loss for the sake of Christ. He was the Jew of Jews. Obviously knew all the customs of the Jews, and obviously we fit right in there, huh? Let's see. Yes. And those under the law. That law being the Jewish law, customs and ceremonial laws. To those under the law I became as one under the law, though not being myself under the law, that I might win those under the law. So it's like Jews, and this is still Jews that he's talking about here. Paul temporarily followed the customs of the Jews so as not to offend them. To offend them would be a hindrance to their acceptance of the good news. As Paul stated in 1 Corinthians 9:19, he is free. He's no longer needed to follow the ceremonial laws and customs of the Jews because the Jewish Messiah himself had nullified the distinctively Jewish parts of the Mosaic law. For example, in Matthew 15:11, it is not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but what comes out of the mouth that defiles a person. Thanks, Dave. So you had the food that was clean and unclean, the animals you could eat, animals you couldn't eat, and that was done away with. So Paul didn't have to follow that custom any longer. 1 Corinthians 7:19, for neither circumcision counts for anything, nor uncircumcision, but keeping the commandments of God. 1 Corinthians 12:12-13. For just as the body is one and has many members, and all the members of the body, though many, are one body, so it is with Christ. For in one Spirit we are all baptized into one body, Jews or Greeks, slaves or free, and all were made to drink of one Spirit. And Romans 10:12. For there is no distinction between Jew and Greek, for the Lord is Lord of all, bestowing his riches on all who call on him. We are all children of Abraham, not by blood, not by genetics, but by faith in the one true God.
Amen.
And as an example of Paul being a Jew, being under the law, is in Acts 21, 17 through 26. When he had come to Jerusalem, the brothers received us gladly. On the following day, Paul went in with us to James, and all the elders were present. After greeting them, he related one by one the things that God had done among the Gentiles through his ministry. And when they heard it, they glorified God, and they said to him, "You see, brother, how many thousands there are among the Jews of those who have believed. They are all zealous for the law, and they have been told about you that you teach all the Jews who are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses' teaching, telling them not to circumcise their children or walk according to our customs. What then is to be done? They will certainly hear that you have come. Do therefore what we tell you. We have 4 men who are under a vow. Take these men and purify yourself along with them, and pay their expenses, so that they may shave their heads. Thus all will know that there is nothing in what they have been told about you, but that you yourself also live in observance of the law. But as for the Gentiles who have believed, we have sent a letter with our judgment that they should abstain from what has been sacrificed to idols, and from blood, and from what has been strangled, and from sexual immorality." Paul then took them in, and the next day he purified himself along with them, and went into the temple, giving notice when the day of purification would be fulfilled, and the offering presented for each of them. On those outside the law, which are those not under the Jewish law. With those outside the law, I became as one outside the law, not being outside the law of God, but under the law of Christ, that I might win those outside the law. Paul didn't conform to the world. Paul didn't conform to the world and live unrighteously when he became as a Gentile. He simply followed their customs, so long as they did not cause him to sin. Following the customs of the Gentiles so as not to offend them, as with the Jews. To offend them would be a hindrance to the acceptance of the gospel. Paul was well suited to reach both the Jews and the Gentiles, for he was both a Jew and a Roman citizen. As we read in Acts 22:25, "But when they had stretched him out for the whips, Paul said to the centurion who was standing by, 'Is it lawful for you to flog a man who is a Roman citizen and uncondemned?'" States his Roman citizenship there. "And to the weak I became weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all people, that by all means I might save some." The New Living Translation is a paraphrase translation. I use that one for this verse. It clearly clarifies it. Does a very good job of it. 1 Corinthians 8, 1 through 13. "Now regarding your question about food that has been offered to idols, yes, we know that we all have knowledge about this issue. But while knowledge makes us feel important, or puffed up as some versions say, because Corinthians kind of were proud people, it is love that strengthens the church. Anyone who claims to know all the answers doesn't really know very much, but the person who loves God is the one who God recognizes. So what about eating meat that has been offered to idols? Well, we all know that an idol is not really a god, and that there is only one God. There may be so-called gods, both in heaven and on earth, and some people actually worship many gods and many lords. But for us, there is one God, the Father, by whom all things were created and for whom we live. And there is one Lord, Jesus Christ, through whom all things were created and through whom we live. However, not all believers know this. Some are accustomed to thinking of idols as being real. So when they eat food that has been offered to idols, they think of it as the worship of real gods, and their weak consciences are violated. It's true that we can't win God's approval by what we eat. We don't lose anything if we don't eat it, and we don't gain anything if we do. But you must be careful so that your freedom does not cause others with a weaker conscience to stumble. Or, yeah, put any of these verses up there, Jessica.
I lost track.
Did you see my list? Where was I? Okay. The weaker conscience to stumble. For if others see you with your superior knowledge, eating in the temple of an idol, won't they be encouraged to violate their conscience by eating food that has been offered to an idol? So because of your superior knowledge, a weak believer for whom Christ died will be destroyed. And when you sin against other believers by encouraging them to do something they believe is wrong, you are sinning against Christ. So if what I eat causes another believer to sin, I will never eat meat again as long as I live, for I don't want to cause another believer to stumble. So that's the context of the weaker person. And if something is doesn't matter if something is a sin or not, if we believe it's wrong and we do it anyway, that is sin. And if we cause someone who believes something is wrong to do that which they feel is wrong, we are sinning, causing them sin also. Paul is an amazing man of God. So that nothing would hinder the spread of the gospel, Paul sacrificed a great deal. In 1 Corinthians 9, 1 through 12, am I not free? Am I not an apostle? Have I not seen Jesus our Lord? Are not you my workmanship in the Lord? If to others I am not an apostle, at least I am to you, for you are the seal of my apostleship in the Lord. This is my defense to those who would examine me. Do we not have the right to eat and drink? Do we not have the right to take along a believing wife, as do the other apostles and the other brothers of the Lord and Cephas? Or is it only Barnabas and I who have no right to refrain from working for a living? Who serves as a soldier at his own expense? Who plants a vineyard without eating any of its fruit? Or who tends a flock without getting some of the milk? Do I say these things on human authority? Does not the law say the same? For it is written in the law of Moses, you shall not muzzle an ox when it treads out the grain. Is it for oxen that God is concerned? Does he not certainly speak for our sake? It was written for our sake, because the plowman should plow in hope, and the thresher should thresh in hope of sharing in the crop. If we have sown spiritual things among you, is it too much if we reap material things from you? What is the greater value? There's salvation in the Lord or material goods, right? If others share this rightful claim on you, do not we even more? Nevertheless, we have not made use of this right, but we endure anything rather than put an obstacle in the way of the gospel of Christ. Paul and Barnabas gave up their rights to support in the places that they were sharing in the gospel. However, established churches from other areas would often send them support. But where they were, they didn't take wives. They didn't take wives and have them with them. They didn't always dine in people's homes and eat their food, and they often worked to supply for themselves. They didn't accept gifts from others. They didn't want anything at all to be a hindrance to that. And there were a lot of false teachers and stuff that were running around out there, and they were getting money for doing stuff, and it was not of God, obviously. So that was one way to set themselves apart, because they weren't receiving anything, unless it was from one of the established churches. Like in 2 Corinthians 11, 8 through 9, I robbed other churches by accepting support from them in order to serve you. And when I was with you and was in need, I did not burden anyone. For the brothers who came from Macedonia supplied my need, so I refrained and will refrain from burdening you in any way. As an apostle, Paul needed to become all things to all people, to be as effective as possible at spreading the gospel. Apostles are sent. Their job, their purpose is to share the gospel, and are usually supported by the church. Most of us are not apostles, but disciples. Disciples study the word, share the gospel, and follow Christ, but are not like full-time, and not full-time are not supported by the church. Many of us in here have jobs and do other things, but like missionaries, they go out there to share the gospel and are often supported by those back home. like people getting the wrong idea. I know when I was in Guatemala, on a mission trip down there, you know, we'd help these people. And they just lived in these like little shacks. It was like 3 walls, metal so thin you could literally cut through with your pocket knife. And some places they actually have like real walls, but a lot of them were just those like little shacks. Some worse than that. And we had these like little stove things that we were putting in there. And oftentimes for the group I was working with, we get done, you know, they'd be like, oh, can we take your picture? You know, so we get the people and we take our picture, and then off we go. And I didn't think about it a whole lot at the time, but later that bothered me. You know, it's like, what are these people thinking? You know, it's like these, you know, rich Americans or people from the United States, because they're in the Americas, and apparently that's offensive if you say, like, hey, where are you from? Like, oh, we're from America. And I'm like, that's dumb. We're also from America. So, but I was like, if I did that again, I wouldn't get pictures. Because, you know, what are they thinking? These people come down here, they take pictures, they help us, they take pictures with us, they're like, oh yeah, I did my good deed, look at me, you know, I helped these people, blah, 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 you know. And it's like when politicians, the one time they go to church, they make sure they have their, you know, the paparazzi there to take the pictures and, you know, all that stuff, because it's just fake. And I would hate for them, the people that were helping down there, kind of, you know, sharing the gospel with, to think that we're down there for just on our own personal reasons or whatever. So, I don't know if they think that, if they thought that, but yeah, afterwards I thought that, and I'm like, you know, I won't do that again. But anyway, so some of the ways we can be all things to all people. We can show interest in things that others are interested in, and use that to develop a relationship so we can share with them the good news. And this obviously helps if you have broad interests. I had a Taekwondo instructor while I was at Rankin, and he was an engineer, and he had a lot of broad interests. I mean, I'll talk about music, sports, you know, martial arts, obviously, cars, whatever. He knew something about everything, you know, and I thought that was really, you know, really cool, and I wish I was more broad like that. But yeah, he was an engineer, and he was just tired of sitting there with his cup of coffee and decided he was going to teach Taekwondo. So he started doing that. He was a really great guy. Not a Christian, unfortunately, but hopefully he is now. But he made a comment sometime back then about his knee, and saying that you know, wasn't intelligent design because he was having issues with his knee. But yeah, we can you know, talk to people. And it's talking about sports. If you're into sports, I'm not into sports. I would be completely useless in that. But just anything, you know, because like, I mean, most people here have got the same, you know, customs, same. What was the word I'm looking for? Anyway, but just, you know, it's just a way to be that type of person. That it's just an end is what you're looking for, you know, and you don't really have to worry about offending too many people here. I mean, the gospel is an offense, but let that be, you know, the only offense. But listen to people, get to know them. When they know you care, they are far more inclined to listen. As the saying goes, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. People won't even listen to you unless they know you care about them. James 1:19, know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. Be kind, no matter where you are, in person, on phone, or online. Be kind and be patient with people. James 1:20 says, for the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. Be sensitive to the cultures. It helps to have knowledge of the person's culture to whom you are speaking. Trained missionaries know this. You need to know what is in our Western culture that may be offensive to another. I was with a group, the Papal Singers, with my daughters for a short time, and they mentioned they were performing in, I think it was Europe, and they're singing their song and they're doing their moves, and it's like nothing means nothing here, right? Well, wherever they were, which I think it was Europe, after they got done performing, this person comes up to them and says, "You can't do that. That move, you can't do that." It's like, that's like giving them the finger. So this here means nothing, but there it was like flipping them off. It was that bad. It was like, wow. And it's not like it's some super foreign country that's really, foreign to you. But it was, it helps to know because a lot of people offended by that, right? Let's see, deal with prejudice. Oh, like I mentioned with, they told us that when we went down to Guatemala. I said, when they ask you where you're from, don't say you're from America. That was, they didn't like that. It was offensive. They would say, tell them you're from the United States. Deal with prejudice. This is a quote. "Prejudice of every kind has been part of human history since the beginning. Despite how hard we try, we all carry some form of prejudice against certain other people groups. Ironically, even those who denounce prejudice of any sort are usually quite prejudiced against those they consider prejudiced." I think you've seen that with those who are, yes, I knew I might forget it. All that's push for tolerance, oh, be tolerant, be tolerant, be tolerant. You realize that those who push the hardest for tolerance are the most intolerant people, the Christians. Admitting to God our own pride and repenting of judgmental attitudes and lack of love should be an ongoing process for Christians wanting to follow Paul's example of being all things to all people. As a former Pharisee, he had to deal with his own prejudice against Gentiles in order to spread the gospel to the people Jesus had called him to. Now, he was Saul. He had a major extreme prejudice against Christians. Well, he was hunting them down and killing them and all that stuff. I'm surprised this doesn't quote that. But, Paul had a couple prejudices that he really needed to get over. Jonah. He had a prejudice against the Ninevites, right? He did not want to bring the gospel to them, so he ran away. Didn't work. The goal of the Christian is to be inoffensive in every way except in the matter of the cross. The message of the cross of Christ naturally gives offense, but we cannot water it down. The preaching of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, it says in 1 Corinthians 1:18. Jesus warned us not to be shocked when the world hates us. It hated him first, in John 15:18. Our message is offensive to human pride and contradicts the sin nature, so our behavior and our attitudes should not give offense. When we strive to follow Paul's example and become all things to all people, we must be willing to humble ourselves. Let go of our rights, meet people where they are, and do whatever Jesus calls us to do. He died to save them. We must love them enough to tell them that in all ways they can understand. That is all. You guys have a song?
Yep.
Yep.